Good morning, everybody. There is a lot about this morning that is strangely familiar. Strangely familiar in the sense that there was a time, at least up to March, when I used to struggle with the network, the unreliability of the network during my live broadcasts. So I evolved a system where I would sit, pre-record, and then have the video uploaded to YouTube. When I had an assistant, that was a very comfortable mode for me because Shayo is unusually adept at making sense out of the chaos that I would create. But I'm the one who is having to wing it, and I found the live broadcasts by far more convenient. But Elon Musk has assured that at least for this week, I'm going back, at least we're back to pre recording and then somehow finding a way to upload. So even though I'm recording on Sunday morning, it's not our usual live broadcast. I hope we'll be back live by next week. Well, be that as it may, good morning and welcome to this week. We'll start, even though it's not our usual live thing, we'll start with the week that was because a couple of things did happen in that week that I would love us to um, use as a window into understanding and interpreting the future. One of the first things that mustn't be missed in the week that was the visit of the Catholic bishops to Aso Rock, or maybe I should say Aso Rock. Mhm. So there was a statement that Tinubu made. A lot of people have taken umbrage at it. It's been pointed at, but I'm like, the man has merely confirmed what he has always told you. He said, all is fair in politics. The only quarrel I have with that statement is the refusal to prefix politics with Nigerian. So if he had simply said, all is fair in Nigerian politics, I would have had very little argument. But as it is, the only thing I may have to say would be me bickering about linguistic inexactitude. Because outside of that, what is it that Tinubu has said that is actually untrue? Take Tinubu out of the picture. Obasanjo could have uttered the exact same words. Probably the only one who could not have genuinely uttered those words would have been Jonathan. Because of the lot of them who have occupied that seat, he is the only one who had democratic instincts. Or perhaps, as I have posited, it's too cowardly to have used the powers of the Nigerian office. But the truth of the matter is, any one of the persons who had occupied that office, the persons who had occupied that office could have said the exact same words that Tinubu said. It's just the truth. All is fair in Nigerian politics. It's just the way it is. And I heard Bishop Onayekon, I believe that is Bishop Emeritus. He should forgive me. I don't really know what his title is, but you know the person I'm speaking about. He said, and I think I'll be quoting him if I say this. He said, there is a win by all means mentality underpinning those words. And he then underlined it by saying, they have all of the means. He needn't add foul. But anyway, once he said all, you understand what it means. Look, the man of God, Onayeko, And I call him man of God not because of religion, but because of the truth he spoke. He more or less had a lot to say. The Catholic bishops had a lot to say, and they forced Tinubu to open a window. This one is not even a window. He opened the veil completely, and it is for the rational and those who are still possessed of sentience. That's the capacity to use their brain to interpret words that were very clearly unambiguous. He spoke more than a word. So if you're preparing for election next year, understand that all is fair in politics. And according, that's pa, Tinubu, and according to Onoyeko, fact of the matter is they will win by all means. Hmm? All means. So let's leave that for now. The second thing I would love to speak about is the Oshun debacle. I call it debacle because it offers a window into the dysfunction of what we call democracy in Nigeria. The sitting governor, that's the dancer, Adi, is interested in a second term. The APC, because of the man from Iragbiji, if he's from Iragbiji, as they say it's from Iragbiji, they want Osun State free or foul. And I wouldn't even argue that it doesn't even have to be because that is the Iragbiji man's hometown. No, home state rather. No, it doesn't have to be because of that. It's simply because the APC must grab all states, and that particular state is of interest. It's a state of particular interest or concern, I should say. And of course, it must be achieved by all means, free, fair, or foul. And in pursuit of this, you had MC Mushroom Peking, the one occupying the national presidency of NURTW in spite of clear direction and judgment, National Industrial Court, Court of Appeal. But of course, the law does not matter. It is the will of men that matters. And the will of men have installed MC Mushroom Peking in office as the NURTW, which is, of course, the enforcement arm of the APC, the private army of the Jagaban himself. His brigadier in Lagos became the general in Abuja, just as the Capone of Lagos now becomes the owner of Nigeria. Let's be very clear. In pursuit of this, they've opened windows for you. Mushroom Peking is issuing directives in a state. You have seen thugs backed by policemen invading a state to enforce the will of a factional chairman or the president of the NURTW. You've seen policemen clashing with naval personnel who are resisting the thugs. You saw it with your own eyes. You saw it. In this age and time, multiple evidence abound everywhere you look online. In the week that was, in pursuit of capturing power, we've seen this before. But here is where I'll end the week that was because it's not really a life thing and there is no need for us to. The week that was served many purposes. But let me just bring these home. Onoyeko said something that I found very instructive in the course of his interview with Charles. And what he said was, when it comes to ensuring free and fair election in Nigeria, it has become impossible for incumbents to organize free and fair elections And then he crowned it. And this is a direct quote. He said, we still have that problem. What's the problem? Free and fair election. You know the saddest part of the whole thing? The man who could have institutionalized democracy in Nigeria is the one who is busy wailing impotently from his confines in Abeokuta, still rehashing a battle that took place between himself and Etiku when he was seeking third term and Etiku was seeking power. He's still rehashing that battle decades later, whilst we are grappling with the consequences of his own failure to rise above his base instinct and be a statesman instead of the Nigerian politician that he became. Even when he was in uniform, he was a Nigerian politician. Now that he has left office in his 90s, he's still a Nigerian politician. But today is not the day for Obasanjo. But sometimes history must be placed in its right context. We still have that problem. That was on Oyekon's indictment, historical indictment on Nigerian politics and Nigerian politicians. Win by any means, free, fair, or foul. Obasanjo is the father of Nigerian democracy, if not Nigeria itself. Look all around you. So when he's busy preaching about Atiku or busy sermonizing and writing hypocritical letters, let it be clear. History has multiple windows and doors and veils that have been torn by which he himself will be judged. Do as I say, not as I do. But the unfortunate thing is that people learn more from the examples you lay down when you have the stage. Which one of your many preachments can you in good conscience lay claim that you stand on firm moral ground? Imagine, Tinubu is saying all is fair in politics. Can you truly, can any one of those who have occupied that office argue against his assertion, as evil as that assertion is? Which one of those who have occupied the presidency in Nigeria can say in good conscience that they did not live and rule by that same creed? Enough said. Last week, I was mulling the many issues that requires discourse. And the more I mulled these issues, the more I realized that there is a critical need to speak truth, unvarnished, unburnished, difficult truths to ourselves. When I say speak truth to ourselves, I mean the kind of truth that Yorubas will say when siblings lock themselves in a room and speak truth to each other, it is even possible that they will come out of that room frowning. But if they've dealt in truth, and more importantly, in love, love meaning that you speak the tough truth, but you speak it with some sensibilities, understanding the context and also understanding how the other person might view the truth that you have to say. So I said to myself, since these people have divided themselves into so many parts, why don't I speak to several, as many of these segments as is practical? So I said to myself, I need to speak with enough. Don't worry, I'll come there when we get to explanations. There is also a need for me to speak with the East, with the South, and with the West. If they will not allow us to have a dialogue of nations, if we've been able to divide ourselves as almost as hopelessly as we have managed. I also believe that it is incumbent on us to begin the journey to healing. But you really can't heal a wound, especially a badly healed one, without cauterizing it. That means you sometimes have to peel the scab, open up the wound, take out the putrefied flesh. Some cases you even have to amputate, but you must open it, cauterize it to heal it. So I'm going to kick it off this week, and it's with enough. And I've titled my talk this morning, or shall I say sermon. Prophets are called to different pulpits. Your imams will preach to you, your pastors will preach to you. I'm not an imam and I'm not a pastor, but I have a pulpit. And that's where you are this morning. So you are going to bear with me. So this morning I have titled my sermon, Tiptoeing Around the North. What do I mean by tiptoeing? You see, the truth is bitter. And I mean bitter. Bitter in the sense that lies comfort, lies massages egos. Lies will tell you what you want to hear. Not sometimes, not even necessarily because they want to harm you, but because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they would lie to you. Oh, does this dress fit me? Of course it fits you. Who am I to say that it doesn't fit you so that you now start looking at me like I don't like you? It fits you, it's nice. You're already out. Your husband is right there. Who am I to now tell you that anything is wrong with the dress? The dress is perfect. I just told a lie. But it's not just a convenient lie, it's a comfortable lie. I'm obliged to lie in that situation. Or a policeman comes and he wants me to compromise a client. I'll probably say, I don't know. That's a lie. I know. But if I explain to him that lawyer client privilege does not allow me to disclose except a crime had been committed, you wouldn't understand that. So the truth is that we've almost always tiptoed around the north. There are way too many things that we've avoided saying because we don't want to hurt cultural and religious sensibilities. And we have to navigate these sensibilities carefully in order not to be labeled anti-North, or in some cases anti-Muslim or tribalistic. The fact is that the grievance politics that are played by northern politicians, religious rulers, persons who should be men of thought, the convenient grievances they raise when objective criticisms are raised about certain cultural practices or religious practices in the North, and now it impacts the larger Nigerian state. The grievances have made it very difficult, and it's not unique to the North, by the way. But in this case, given the focus of my talk this morning, I'm speaking about the North, and the North occupies a unique place in Nigeria. So its unreadiness to embrace criticism have meant that a lot of people have avoided discussing difficult subjects when it comes to northern Nigeria. But the truth of the matter is that in the absence of the truth, there is no cure for what ails us. I believe it was Uthman Damfodio that said that conscience is an open wound. Yeah, I think something along those lines, and only truth can cure it. It is more or less the same situation we find ourselves in. The Nigerian situation is like a wound that is healed badly. It has scars. Now we must open it. And to open it, we must tell ourselves some very hard truths. And one of the first of the truths that we must tell ourselves begins from our definitions. What is the North? Because we see that and I'm saying tiptoeing around the North. Which North are we talking about? Which of the Norths? Because we speak about the North as though we're talking about one homogeneous, united North, a single entity. But the question is it the North of the Hausa Fulani, which is already a lie? Hausa Fulani. There's nothing called Hausa Fulani. Behind that Hausa Fulani label lies a fraud. There is no Hausa Fulani. There is Fulani and there is Hausa. But when you begin with Hausa Fulani, you've already begun with a lie. So is it the North of the Northern Christians? And we must understand that the Northern, when you talk about Northern Christian, that is not a tribe. That is a collection of probably over 100 different nationalities who are separate and distinct from the Fulanis, who were not Islamized before the colonial masters got here, and who refused Islamization once the colonial masters were here, and who views religion as a matter of identity. It is integral and central to their identity. It's not just about faith. It is about a people saying we are separate and distinct. Is it the North of the Fulani who are a separate nation? Is it the North of the rich who crisscross all ethnicities and religion? That's the North of David Mark. Is that the North of Akume, of Suzwan, of Muftuan in Plateau? Those are the halves, the men of power. Is that the North we're talking about, or the North of the deprived, the impoverished, the Amajiris, persons who are deliberately kept underfoot? Is that the North we're talking about? Because it is very important that we understand which of the Norths we're tiptoeing around, because there is an appropriation. And within that appropriation lies the devaluation of multiple persons, interests, nations, and the arrogation of their rights to persons who presume to speak in the name of the North. So this morning, which of the Norths are we talking about? Is it the North of the Sardauna? The North of the Sardauna that had room to accommodate his Christian populace. The North of the Sardauna that fought against the introduction of full-blown Sharia, which was what Sheikh Gumi, the father of the current hostage terrorist sympathizer, wanted. He was the Grand Cadi of northern Nigeria and he wanted Sharia. Ahmadu Bello did not do that. The Sardauna did not do that. He understood the need to unite the North in spite of his own Islamist instincts. He was cosmopolitan enough to understand the need to allay the fears of the Northern Christian, who I refuse to call minority. The Northern Christian, they were significant enough in the calculations of Sardauna, who wanted a united North, that he, instead of introducing Sharia in northern Nigeria, accepted the penal code modeled after the Pakistani system. Pakistan is almost 99% Christian. At least I know it, well over 90% Muslims rather. But it has a penal code. It doesn't have the Sharia law because it is understood that it is incompatible. The implementation of Sharia law is incompatible, at least the criminal element of it is incompatible with anybody who is running towards civilization. But Nigeria, northern Nigeria, in spite of the political powers of Sardauna or Sokoto, he avoided it. He knew what it would cause. He accepted that they were all better off under a penal code rather than the Sharia. Is that the North that we're talking about? The accommodating North that understood the need to have a single vision, uniting the people, even though it was largely predicated on political expediency. Is that the North we're talking about today? Let us all understand something. The North is particularly important in any discussion we are going to have about Nigeria, because Nigeria is to be governed largely on the back of the vision imposed on it by the Northern hegemony that had been at its foundation from the beginning. What do I mean? Every nation, every country in the world, whether it be multi-ethnic, whether it be multi-religious or secular, even when there is only one ethnicity, there is usually an hegemony that propels its development or ruination. What is an hegemony? Is the overarching power in the space, the one that influences the outcome, the one that is largely responsible for its trajectories, the one who has the overarching influence on its decision making and implementation. The reality of our situation, and this is not the time to detain ourselves by spending too much time arguing about the fact that Nigeria has been shaped by the Northern hegemony. That is beyond argument. The fact that between 1966 and 1979, Nigeria was completely redesigned by an hegemony that had always wanted power centralized. When I say always, the minute oil became the major revenue earner, it was no longer fashionable to stay with derivation. But I will come to this as we get into the meat of my argument. The point is, Nigeria became a place governed largely by the Northern hegemony in the core interest of Northern Nigeria. When I say Northern Nigeria, that was the appropriation term. Whether this now benefited the haves or the have-nots is a matter of historical evaluation, and we shall evaluate. But the important thing is that the North had the imprimatur over Nigeria. So what has the Northern hegemony battered for Nigeria? Let's tell ourselves the truth. If those who have had custody of Nigeria had prioritized education, one of the first places where we will find that, at least the evidence of that, would be within his own space. Because I imagine, as the Yorubas will say, tí wọ́n bá fún wèrè lọ́kọ, á roko sọ́dọ̀ ààrẹ. If you hand the insane, the lunatic, the hope, he would at least make sure that he makes his own mound. The point is, with all the years of serious money that power resided in northern Nigeria and the people who claimed power in the name of the North, had the capacity to have done as they pleased, what did it birth for the North? What's the educational system in the North like? The reality is that today, there is practically no schooling going on in the Northeast. Practically none. Practically, because all the schools have been deserted, and where they are not deserted, teachers are all gone. And when you're talking about schools, you can only speak about schools in terms of the urban centers. Nothing can open in the rural areas where banditry, terrorism, Islamist terrorism, Fulani banditry has overtaken everywhere. So as things stand, the educational system up north is completely ruined. And that has further jeopardized the lives of multiple numbers of children whose future have become even more bleak than usual. Because now that you have all these vast insecurity that has overtaken the place, what has happened? You have educational lag and human capital deficiencies and deficits all over the place in northern Nigeria. Feudalism requires the stupefaction of the mass. The people must be stupid so that they do not argue their condition. So you have a situation where deliberately, ignorance was weaponized against the people. And that is why you have an Almajiri system that places emphasis on begging rather than learning. There's nothing wrong with the Almajiri system, ordinarily. It had been in existence for way too long for it to be deemed completely evil. But question is this: who has control over the syllabus of the Almajiri? What happened to the Almajiri schools that Jonathan found? They've become places for bandits to reside. They've become to forests all over the place. So you have a situation today where the advantage of population is lost because a population that is untrained becomes a liability, ready human resource for terrorists of all hues, ready human resource for bandits and criminals. That is what we have all over northern Nigeria. And today it's being exported all across Nigeria. Wherever you turn in Nigeria, you find persons of northern extraction, children who should be in schools, begging. Don't worry. When it comes to the time to speak to the Yorubas, to speak to the Igbos, to speak to my brothers and sisters in the South, we'll speak to what they have contributed to our situation. But this is the reality. The North ignores to train its children. It has rendered them victims even before they were born. And there is nothing on ground to suggest that anything is about to change. So whilst it has ruined its own space, the North is contributing insecurity, is constituting nuisance, contributing nuisances all across the length and breadth of Nigeria, avoidable ones. But the reality again is this: when you acknowledge the reality of your difficulties, you can then begin to evolve solutions to the problems. But when you continue to pretend like the problems are not there, to the detriment of every other sector and section of the country, we have a duty to let you know. The educational system in the North has collapsed. And in the North that I'm talking about, I'm talking Northeast, talking Northwest, I'm even talking North Central, because of terrorism that has come to disrupt. Because it's not, for the North Central, it's not about an absence of will. It's about the fact that it's no longer safe. So in the urban centers, you will find schools. What quality they offer, I really can't speak to it. But at the end of the day, what you have is a deliberate attempt at weaponizing ignorance, which is decades old. The consumptive dependency that has ensured that northern Nigeria has remained undeveloped and largely responsible for the worst human development indices that you will find in Nigeria is not by accident. When you develop a system that is found on injustice, it comes back to bite you at some point. What am I talking about? In 1953, a decision was taken at the London Conference prior to independence. 1953. It was to finalize the Littleton Constitution. And when they constituted the 1954 conference in Lagos, one of the key decisions that was taken, without which there would never have been a Nigerian state, was that derivation would be the foundation for revenue allocation. And the Lagos Conference of 1954 agreed that 50% will go to the region from where the revenue is derived. 35% will go into a distributable pool to be shared by all the regions. 10%, no, 15% should go to the federal government. Now, let me explain something to you. You heard that 35% should go into the distributable pool. That 35% that was to go into the distributable pool was not even going to be shared equally amongst the three regions that were in existence at the time. There were considerations for the fact that some people needed more than others. So they had a formula, said national interest, which is the equality of state on one hand. That the equality of state will give 40% of that distributable pool. Population accounted for 30%. Internal revenue accounted for another 10%. Land mass accounted for 10%. So there was equity in the sharing. Even though there was prominence given to the region from where the money might have come, there was equity in sharing what was left. This was at the time when the wealth of Nigeria derived from groundnut and other products, ginger, turmeric, and all the other spices in the north. The economy of the West was largely founded on cocoa, kola nut, and other commodities. The East was palm oil. It was easy to agree on how things should be shared. But the minute the 1966 coups happened, the Civil War came, and power devolved on the North, everything changed. Everything changed. In a true federalism, federating units sustain themselves through their internal taxation, and they develop local revenue streams by developing their local resources. They did it in the First Republic. The North did its thing, the East did its thing, and so did the West. The West did its thing to the point where everybody actually invested in real estate. That's why you have Cocoa House, you have Western House. Those were built by regions. They had embassies abroad. They developed their natural resources. I know that the West had Igbeti Marble Company. They had plywood industry in Ekpe. These were owned by the regional governments. And they founded their development on the back of the taxes that they collected from citizens who were connected to the system. But the minute the feudalists took over, that's the North. After the Civil War, there was a shift away from taxation, which equally contributed to a shift away from citizenship. Because when those who are ruling you are not fiscally responsible to you, of course, why should they account to you when they are not taxing you and they are avoiding taxing you because they don't want to render an account for whatever they collect? So aside from the destruction of both the northern educational system. There is a destruction of if and a distortion of the basis of the state's relationship with citizens, because once you distorted the revenue allocation basis, placed a heavy reliance on funds that are unaccounted for, which is why we could be talking about Gulf windfalls that disappeared. We could be talking 2.8 billion naira. Oil money is missing. Money is always missing because there is no accountability. And this lack of accountability has its root in the north. Nobody asks questions of the Seriki. This is the culture that has been fostered on Nigeria. And when I say this is the culture that has been fostered on Nigeria, let's be clear about something. Every state develops off the back of hegemonies. Hegemonies have character, and it is the character of the hegemonies that usually becomes the character of the state that they influence. Nigeria is today a feudal state because of the feudal nature of the hegemony that has evolved to develop Nigeria. Nigeria today has developed on the back of the northern hegemony. So today you find a disconnect between those who are ruling and those being ruled. Alhajis are ruling us. All of our governors are Fulanis. They are emirs. That is what I mean by they are Fulanis, and this we hold to the north. Today, when you look at the disconnect that has taken place between those who rule over our states, between those who rule Nigeria itself and the people, you cannot connect these to a system predicated on citizenship. You cannot connect these to a system governed by law. But a system governed by law is anathemic to feudalism. It's not even about being dictatorial, it's about ensuring that there are never rules that binds them. So when rules do not bind the rulers, it simply means that the rules are what the ruler says the rules are, and never what is certain and clear to all. Because even the one that is certain and clear to all is subject to the whims and caprices of the rulers, who do not believe themselves bound to obey the rules even when they write them down. That is the reality. It is not for a want of laws that we are where we are. It is for a want of the will to uphold the law, talk less of obeying it in the first place. And the fact that those who are meant to enforce the law understand that there are limits to their capacity to enforce these laws, because those laws were never meant to be enforced in the fashion that they were written. And the discretion to enforce or not to enforce is what guarantees the longevity in office or not of the enforcement officer. Is also what guarantees that he can supplement the poor salary that is systematically paid in order to keep him hungry, so that he might do the dirty works of those in power instead of questioning them or seeking to hold them accountable. So there is an entire system of compromise that has been built on the back of the feudalization of Nigeria, for which we need to thank northern Nigeria. Which of the northern Nigeria? Those who have held the north captive. Is ruling class, which has become the Nigerian ruining class, at least the foundation of it. There is a resistance to structural restructuring of the country, all thanks to northern Nigeria. And when you look all around, you see no evidence of any benefit to the people themselves. But those who benefit, the ruiners of northern Nigeria, appropriate the names of the people of northern Nigeria, the victims of northern Nigeria. They appropriate their names. The victims of Dogondaji, the victims of the many terrorist Kachalas up north, Kachalas both in power and in the forest. They are victims and not benefiting from the current system that benefits none of the victims, be they northerners or southerners. But you continue to resist structurally restructuring this country. How do you continue to expect that you can hold on to unfair advantages that has engendered injustice and given rise to the birth of multiple perversions all over the country? What do you think battered IPOP, MEND, ODOA, OPC? These are reactions to what are fairly concluded to be the overreaching influence and overbearing powers of the North. These are reactions. But you keep resisting every attempt to look at the structure of the country. We have 36 states, 744 local governments. God knows how many LCDA. Lagos is supposed to have 20 local governments per constitutional schedule. It has 57 LCDAs. So you can imagine how many LCDAs. And the important thing you must note is this. Each local government or LCDA has a council chairman. Everybody is drawing from this Agbomagbe Lake, this lake that they just keep taking. They've taken so much that there is nothing to take. Now they are borrowing to take. And our children, in some cases, our children's children would have to pay. And you are still continuing to resist restructuring this country to be more efficient and to reflect the will of the people. A group, a tiny percentile, less than 1 percentile of us, coupled with foreign beneficiaries, refuse to restructure our country in a manner that gives power back to the ethnic nationalities, allows Nigeria, if it remains in its current form, to grow. We can't even talk about our country. Every attempt to talk about Nigeria is seen as an attempt to take power away from the North. Who does this power benefit? Do you know that there are genuine grievances at the base of almost everything that is going wrong in Nigeria? The insecurity, the resource drain that we see. Okay, let me bring this up. What is the difference between Orire and Katsina? Orire being in Oyo State. And I'm referring specifically to the terrorist kidnappings that took place in Ogbomoso. What is the difference between that? What made the outcomes different? Let's be clear about something. The North is responsible. And when I say the North, I'm not just talking about the beneficiaries of the economic largesse that accrues from the appropriation of the North. I'm talking about the people themselves. They constitute the North. Deborah was killed, lynched, burnt alive, murdered by our own classmates. You can take those to be what the Oyibos will call the reasonable man in the Clapham omnibus. Somebody you could pick up off the street and use as a measure of the rational, sane member of that society. In actual fact, I would even give a higher duty of enlightenment to somebody who is within a learning environment. It's not even a secondary school environment, it's a post-secondary school institution, I think a college of education or something along those lines. These were young persons Normal members of the society of northern Nigeria, they grabbed her and they murdered her. They videoed it, and the society stood behind the murderers. Yeah, the society stood behind the murderers. The governor had to impose a curfew. Multiple lawyers. It's their job to defend the accused, but they defended the idea, whether wittingly or unwittingly. Nobody ever paid for the gruesome murder of Deborah. That is the society that is permissive of evil, that normalizes madness. It didn't happen like that in Orire. Muslims and Christians alike condemned it unequivocally. Woro, hundreds carted off into the forest simply because they refused to pay tax to bandits and to convert to their version of Islam. How many people have condemned it? How many Islamic leaders have come out to talk about that? That's in Kwara State. The evil that has overtaken the bulk of Oroland. How many people have come out? Okay, it's fine. That is how you've normalized it. When you create an environment where that is normal, then you have what happened in Jos, where a teacher was lynched. Lynched, just like that. For no sane reason. What reason can even be sane enough to explain mobbing anybody, whether woman or man, to death, whatever the crime may be? But that is normal. It's permitted. The people you've refused to train, deliberately weaponizing their anger, building on their ignorance and bigotry, becomes ready weapons in the hand of any mob. That was what you saw. When Obasanjo was in power and Gani Adams and Fashion were going at it, Obasanjo did not pull back. If nothing else, you have to give Aremu that. He didn't say because they were Yorubas. He played the politics, yes, but he also used force where it was necessary to bring order. But the same Obasanjo, when it came to northern Nigeria and his introduction of political Sharia, quote and unquote, his words, northern Nigeria found no reasonable voice to speak against the imposition of that nonsense over everybody. The brains that occupied Ahmadu Bello's head was nowhere to be found in the heads of the northern intellectuals and ruling class. And nobody could speak out with clarity against the introduction of Islamic criminal law, which is the Sharia that they were bringing, because every other one was already present in Nigeria. Islamic law on inheritance was already part and parcel of Nigeria. The only part of the Sharia that was not part of our jurisprudence was its criminal aspect, which is deemed repugnant to natural justice. But of course, as Obasanjo said, it was political. So he too tolerated the evil until the evil has now overtaken everybody. You politicize Sharia, it battered Boko Haram. Look at OPC. Because it was dealt with and kept in its proper context, it did not become a national nuisance. Fulani terrorists are called bandits. Fulani murderers are called herders. You find linguistic hypocrisy in the description of evil. You de-radicalize monsters and absorb them into the army, all in the name of the North. And persons who should speak are quiet. And those who speak from outside of the North are deemed anti-North. Let us be clear. A country is not built in this fashion. The Northern hegemony has not served Nigeria profitably. If anything, it has been disastrous for the interest of Nigeria. We can't continue tiptoeing around the truth. And the truth is that Northern Nigeria did not gain independence with the rest of Nigeria in 1960. A people who are denied knowledge, systematically impoverished, cannot be said to be independent. But the worst of the crimes the North has committed against his own people and against Nigeria, the idea of Nigeria, is that he has fostered a situation on all of us now, where our voices have been discounted simply because it suited some person's agenda. I speak of nothing beyond the imposition of a Muslim ticket on all of us, strengthening and defining the character of Nigeria as a place where the voice of the people counts for nothing. There is no longer any pretense at gauging the interest of the people before forcing any agenda on the people. It is a statement of the discount of sovereignty, the complete absence of censure, the impotence of the people writ large. Our opinions count for nothing because our will has been discounted. There are difficult conversations ahead. But just as I am speaking with Northern Nigeria today, I'll speak with all of us as well, including my own. Maybe next week we would even speak with the West. Maybe. Or it might be that we'll be speaking with Igbo. But the reality is that we cannot continue in the way we are. And if we are talking blames, there is enough blame to go around. But the game is it's not a blame game. My intention is to provoke us into talking to ourselves. The North around which we are tiptoeing, is it the same North that does not have space for the likes of Bichi Mashango to question the lies of the existence of an Hausa Fulani nation? Is that the North? The one that cannot abide the independence of the Hausa people? The North that seeks to erase their history and culture, subsume their existence beneath that of the Fulanis? Is that the North? The North we're tiptoeing around, is it the North that has multiple massacres going on? Is that the North? Is that the North that Sardauna sought to keep as one? The one where it is okay for persons who do not even speak either English or Hausa, who speaks only Fula, to come and occupy land in the plateau. Is that the north? The north where General Rabe had to die in the forest of Katsina. Is that the north? The north where people who may not have money but could farm and feed themselves are now beggars. Is that the north? Look, the fact is, we're getting to the point where we would have to begin to examine these constructs. Which north? Whose north? Whose interest? But ultimately, it is the silenced in the north. Those who agree that things cannot continue in its form, its current form, who have to find their voices. If you are in the north and all these things have been done in your name, supposedly in your interest, and you've kept quiet even when you've disagreed. If you've not, like my Shango, come out to speak your truth, like Ebuba, the bishop in Jos, like people like Kavman, and a whole lot of others who found their voices, Zachary, a whole lot of people who have spoken the truth. If you cannot find your voices like them, and they continue subsuming you beneath the north that's held all of us back, shame on you. I'll be seeing you next week. But more than anything else, understand. We're talking not because it is all we should do, but we're talking in order to clarify the issues before we act. Clarify the issues, clarify the thoughts, and then mobilize you. I'll leave you once again with the famous words of Kwame Nkrumah. Revolutions are brought about by men of action. No, sorry, I think it's men of thought who act as men of action. You'll forgive me, somewhere along the line, something might have gotten all muddled up there. But the important thing is when you talk, you must act. And at some point, we will act. But if you act without carrying the people with you, you act as Voltron. The North has to be part of that conversation. One part cannot move alone and expect a peaceful transition to a different system. It will require all of us moving together. But all of us can only move together when we recognize the commonalities of our afflictions. There is nothing that hails the North that does not hail the South. Everything that afflicts one afflicts all. As I've pointed out, the Amajiri problem in the North, out of school children in the North, is affecting every part of Nigeria. Your inability to farm because of the insecurity engendered by the impunity that governs our country. It affects all of us. The food price index, it shows up. The insecurity is the chief reason why there is food poverty in Nigeria. So what ails you ails us. I'm not flagellating you to feel better, but we have to cauterize wounds. We have to tell ourselves the truth. It is critical and important that the truth must be told to ourselves. In the absence of these truths, what remains? What truly remains if we must tell ourselves the truth? Take away that, we were left with nothing. So I will see you next week. I'm sure by then we would have resolved the problem with the network. Elon Musk will surely have sent his bill, which he failed to send before cutting my service. Or maybe there's just some other disruption to services. See you next week. Take care of yourselves. God bless you.